Well, guys, I did tell you that this right here would, in fact, backfire. However, there are some people out there who believe that this particular governor may just be getting sacrificed, and I'll explain in this video why that's the case.
Daniel Montano.
Daniel Montano?
You see most of my stuff usually on KUNN. A lot of my stuff.
Unalienable God-given rights. Our rights come from God. Our privileges come from government. Don't get them confused. They're very different. Okay? Rights come from God. He also said we have the right to
have, Governor, the Constitution of New Mexico and the Constitution of the United States, and you're an attorney. Do you think you're on solid constitutional ground here?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, look, I wouldn't do it if I didn't think I had the right. I have the right.
Where is the right? Where is the
phone call that my brother also was a victim of gun violence last week that many of you do not know. While he and my nephew were sitting in their car, they were shot at and their vehicle was impacted by numerous rounds. How can I, as a sheriff, tell him to put his firearms away and not be able to protect himself? I have a fact for you. Criminals do not follow the law or a public health order. Never seen it, we will never see criminals follow the law. Once again, this only punishes law-abiding citizens.
I told you guys that nobody would enforce this crap. You guys saw that montage there. Obviously, we have a sheriff who said, no, we're not going to be enforcing this. Like I told you guys the other day, it would not be enforced. Of course, this video right here is the follow-up to the crazy Karen Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham of the state of New Mexico, which for whatever reason has been voting Democrat every presidential election for, I'd say ever since 2008, even though it's actually a very pro-Second Amendment state. It's also a very pro-oil state, which really kind of baffles me why they do this, why they continue to put crazy people like her in office. But then again, though, at the same time, maybe the demographic makeup of the state, of course, has something to do with it. No pun intended or anything like that, just calling it like it is. Now, guys, I said in the last video on this topic, which I did on Monday, that this one would probably backfire because most of the people involved, or most of the people she was targeting, they would not be targeted by the cops, meaning that sheriff's departments would not go through with this. They would not enforce this edict. And as you guys saw earlier, there obviously was a bit of a protest out there, much, much similar to that of 2019, 2020 time frame. Actually, it was 2019, my bad. When the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, went out of his way to try to pull some form of gun confiscation legislation in the state of Virginia. Don't worry, we'll talk more about that here soon. But this also goes to prove what I've been saying for a long time about gun confiscation, that more than likely police officers would not want to go through with that. They would not want to go through with disarming their own constituents. And even though Albuquerque, New Mexico is a relatively sizable city, it's definitely not the same size as a town like, say, New York or Chicago or Atlanta or LA. Please forgive my voice. It's a little bit groggy. It's been that way the past couple of days. It's part of the reason why I've been recording everything the day before. Still, though, at the same time, as I said before, people ultimately would choose not to actually enforce this. Now, what does Grisham do? Well, she goes on CNN and she decides to give an interview, roughly right around 3 minutes. Let's go ahead and pay attention.
This order is the governor of New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham. Governor, thank you for your time this morning. And let's get to exactly that. We just heard from the sheriff. He joins the attorney general and others who say they won't enforce it. It's unconstitutional. Why do it if it can't be enforced?
Well, that's their opinion. They have no bold actions. They don't have any plans for reducing gun violence. Every single aspect in terms of preventing gun violence, funds, crime labs, more than $150 million for retention, bonuses, and recruitment of new police officers. I'm focused on one thing. We have the third highest gun-related injuries in the country, 90% higher than the national average. We lost 143 children between 2017 and 2021. It is unacceptable, and it calls for immediate and swift and bold action. And frankly, the evidence bears out over and over again. Fewer guns on the streets makes everyone safer, and I'm focused on everyone's constitutional rights, not just those the NRA says I should be focused on.
Yeah, it's not just the NRA. Here's one other concern from the sheriff. Here's what he told my colleague Caitlin Collins last night.
In a couple of months or a year down the road, we're the ones stuck in court, and we're the ones getting sued over all of these infringement of rights and all these other court battles, when I could be focusing so much more on crime.
Has any law enforcement officer in Albuquerque or the county actually enforced this yet?
Well, we haven't issued any civil penalties, but that doesn't mean that we're not and that we don't have the ability to do that.
But that's a no, right?
This is the pushback I get from every single, well, it's a no this minute, but that doesn't mean that we aren't, and it doesn't mean that we don't have additional police presence. And if not this bold action, making sure that you're safe going to the grocery store, you're safe going to a baseball game, you're safe walking on a hiking trail. There are individuals, including young people, where it's illegal today to have a handgun, openly carrying handguns. My question to law enforcement is, where are you? Where are you? In that young 11-year-old, Froylin Villegas, 17 rounds were fired into that gun. 35,000 rounds are fired at least annually in Albuquerque alone. You are not safe going to work, getting your prescription drugs, or going to a public park. And it wasn't just about a cooling off period. It's about making sure that everyone is safer while we do bolder work to get at both the drug epidemic and the gun violence epidemic. Look, and it's not for police to tell me what's constitutional or not. They haven't supported not one gun violence effort in the state of New Mexico, including domestic violence protections, universal background checks. And I know you want to ask me a question, so I'll take a breath, but these are NRA talking points about their rights and not about anybody else's. And it's not a ban. It's a temporary pause so that we can make this community safer.
I hear you.
The NRA, that one's actually news to me. To my knowledge, the only people who have actually filed a lawsuit right now are actually Gun Owners of America. By the way, you may want to consider Gun Owners of America as being your actual voice rather than the NRA. Don't worry, we'll do a project on this in the near future. Now, with all the spin that you would normally get with CNN, that right there to me felt almost like maybe there was no spin, which is something that I've been saying for a pretty long time as well, which is that the Democratic Party, they are looking to try to keep from going far left. That does not mean that they're not far left. Trust me, they still very, very much are. They definitely want to confiscate your guns. They definitely want to use the ATF, all that type of stuff there. And of course, I recently did a video, don't worry, I'll leave it in the description box, about their plans in 2024. But at the same time, though, the media knows that going after people's guns is not exactly a good idea going into a potential campaign season. Now, Michelle Lujan Grisham, she more than likely, I thought let's say she's in her second term, she will more than likely not be pulling another term as governor of New Mexico, which may be the reason why it is that she chose to sign that executive order. But at the same time, though, there are a lot of people out there who are looking at this situation. They're saying to themselves, this right here seems to me like a political test run. We're going to go ahead and throw this out here in the hopes that maybe we can see exactly what it is that we can get away with. And of course, that would be absolutely stupid because obviously these people don't read the Constitution. You can't unilaterally take things from people. And obviously, this lady, when she had given her interview, she thought she had complete carte blanche to do this. State does not supersede federal law in this case. Now, I can obviously see a lot of people out there saying that states' rights is king. For the most part, it kind of sort of is, but at the same time, though, it also kind of isn't. A lot of gray area there, okay? By the way, when I say something like that, it's because not so much the fact that I don't want to go into the legal minutia of it. It's because the legal minutia of it is very, very complicated to explain and probably requires a separate video. Basically, what happened here is that you had a governor who chose to sign an executive order. In that executive order, she basically said, look, we're going to ban firearms. We're going to ban your ability to carry or actually conceal carry, which, by the way, carry meaning open carry. She basically figured because this right here would be a test run to see if they could do something bigger. That's more than likely what occurred. And, of course, the response that she got in tow from the local law enforcement was this here.
Clear. I hold my standards high, and I do not or never will hedge on what is right. And I take my oath seriously. In reference to concealed carry and open carry, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office will not enforce this segment of the order. While I understand the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundations of our Constitution, but most importantly, it is unconstitutional. My oath was to protect the Constitution, and that is what I will do. The governor made it clear in her press conference. She knew we as law enforcement did not agree with the order, and as a result, this was solely her decision. Other than this ban being unconstitutional, here are other reasons why I will not enforce the order. One, what many forget, is I have enough violence here in Bernalillo County. I do not want to have political violence towards my deputies or here in Bernalillo County. My job is to keep the peace and to make sure that the citizens of Bernalillo County are safe, and I do not believe that this order will help me do so. I'm a law enforcement professional. This order will not do anything to curb gun violence other than punish law-abiding citizens.
Sheriff obviously understands that right now we need to be focusing on catching actual criminals, the criminals who actually do the crimes, and not just good old-fashioned gun owners who simply are not causing any crime or causing any problems because he knows that they're not criminals. Maybe that right there is the reason why it is that he decided, like he said earlier, not to enforce this BS. Now, I did get something for this video from Dr. Steve Turley, which I'll play for you guys here in a second. But before I play that, I want to go back to 2019. I want to go back to Virginia. And here's the reason why I want to do this. Now, the law that was signed into the law that was voted on, the law that they were trying to pitch, was basically a law that would be give the state law enforcement, of course, that there being local sheriff's departments, the state troopers in the state of Virginia. I understand it's a different state than New Mexico. But basically what happened in this case was that they had this little law that said that we can take your firearm away from you at just about any time we want to. It was basically like an enhanced red flag law is pretty much what it was. Now, I've given you guys my thoughts on red flag laws. I'm not in favor of them. I normally talk about it on my second channel, Gear Issue 33, which, by the way, there's going to be a couple of updates for that channel. Very quick updates. I haven't really posted that recently. I've been trying to turn that more to a military movie reviews and history channel. I've been a little bit behind on, but don't worry, we'll talk about that soon. Well, basically what happened in that case was that the governor there, Ralph Northam, basically threatened to take away people's guns. Eventually, there was this little ordeal where they called the National Guard, and of course, many men did not show up. They did not muster, which is also almost more proof why it is that a lot of state National Guards would not go through with an order like gun confiscation because obviously the military is supposed to be apolitical, especially the National Guard, which is another reason why it is you don't want politics in the military, which, by the way, you don't want it practiced heavily. And this Marxist takeover of the military is obviously something to be concerned about because when you try to create SJWs in the military, it almost feels like you're creating that those SJWs for the sole purpose of actually attacking his civilians. And I'll talk about that in other projects later on. But basically what ended up happening in that case is that about 22,000 Virginians, 22,000 people showed up open carried in a circle in Richmond, Virginia. And basically what they decided to do was say, look, we're not going to take this. Law enforcement, sheriff's departments, local police, they did not enforce that. However, I need to say this right here. There were a lot of videos that were posted by people who had interactions with police officers that day. The cops eventually came back later on. Some of those videos were on the internet. Some of those videos may still be up there. I'm going to try to put one in. Of course, I'm just kind of previewing you guys now that there's something being played over my face right now. It's probably some form of footage from one of those events where law enforcement suddenly show up to some guy's house and say, look, we saw you here. Is this right here who you are? Those right there was law enforcement attempts to try to coax the firearms out of people. They do this type of stuff all the time depending on the actual leadership. However, in a state like New Mexico where the Democrats are a little bit more pro-2A, I don't see this happening. And of course, to go on top of this, you've also got lawmakers calling for this woman to be impeached. Impeachment more than likely will not occur, but then again, though, I could also be surprised, so don't worry, we will keep an eye on this. Of course, it's probably going to take a while for this to materialize. But the fact of the matter is that this governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, she inadvertently created the exact same thing that Governor Ralph Northam did in the state of Virginia. Let me go ahead and roll this for you guys, and I'll come back on the other side and expand on this
Second
further.
Amendment ban is that she basically turned New Mexico as a whole into a statewide Second Amendment sanctuary. The Albuquerque DA's office is saying openly that they're not going to enforce the governor's executive order. And a number of New Mexico sheriffs are coming out and saying they're not going to enforce it either. Here's the Bernalillo County Sheriff refusing to comply.
Let me be clear. I hold my standards high, and I do not or never will hedge on what is right. And I take my oath seriously. In reference to concealed carry and open carry, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office will not enforce this segment of the order. While I understand the urgency, the temporary ban challenges the foundations of our Constitution, but most importantly, it is unconstitutional. My oath was to protect the Constitution, and that is what I will do. The governor made it clear in her press conference. She knew we as law enforcement did not agree with the order, and as a result, this was solely her decision.
Yeah, a decision that she made on her own and that is not going to be able to be enforced. I mean, you already saw it over the weekend when protesters showed up in Old Town Albuquerque, open carrying their firearms, and no police officer there arrested them or confiscated their weapons. Now the vast majority of New Mexico's counties have already declared themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. They did this actually a couple of years back when their far left state government started threatening gun ownership. 18 of the state's 33 counties have passed resolutions saying they won't enforce gun control bills being considered in the woke New Mexico legislature. And 29 of the state's 33 sheriffs, 29 to 33, signed a letter saying they won't enforce any legislation being considered that violates the Second Amendment.
See, what's happened is that the state of New Mexico, a lot like what happened in the state of Virginia, is they're starting to create sanctuary counties, sanctuary 2A counties, counties where the deputy sheriffs have said, look, we're not going to try to confiscate your weapons. We're not going to want to do that. We obviously don't want to fight with our people. We know there's political disturbances. And by the way, a lot of these counties most of the counties involved here are very, very small counties, but still at the same time, though, local law enforcement is saying, look, people have got a right to own a firearm, and 99.9% of the people who own a firearm don't really use the firearm for anything more than self-defense, hunting, and of course recreation, meaning going to the range. They know that 99.9% of gun owners are not wanting to start a fight. It goes back to that whole argument. If you guys remember when Piers Morgan used to have the sit-downs with Ted Nugent, and Ted Nugent would explain to him, look, dude, we just want you to leave the 99.9% of gun owners that quite frankly just want to be left the hell alone. We just want you to leave us the hell alone. Of course, Piers Morgan, being a freaking redcoat, obviously never understood that and still does not understand that to this day. Of course, he was a breadcoat, so what the hell do you expect? Not trying to say that I, am bashing British people or anything. That's not what I'm doing, but obviously some of them ones, especially those who work in the mainstream media, are in fact still very, very much redcoats. New Mexico, of course, went ahead and started the process. Now, why in the world would they want to start the process? Well, pay very, very close attention to what my man here says, especially in the final 15 seconds.
Crime is riddled, and all we want to do is protect our families, our friends, our communities. I've gone on 2 combat tours with the Marine Corps and fought on the front lines. I've done 11 trips as an independent contractor. She thinks she has the right to take away my freedom to protect my community. I don't think so. This will not stand. We will not comply. Look what the U.S. government did to the Native Americans. They try to strip them of their rights. This is the same thing. Our Apache brothers resisted to the very end. Navajos, we gotta be the same. Resilient.
That land out there is not just land of the Wild West. It's not just the land where Billy the Kid used to roam around. It's not just the land where Billy the Kid ultimately died at. It's not just the land of the Lincoln County Wars. I know I'm kind of going on and on and on about that. But at the same time, though, there's also a lot of native presence, a lot of native stories, a lot of traditions there. You don't think for a second that that man talking about what happened to the Apaches, you don't think that that right there does not still exist? I mean, I understand the native sentiment there, that of course that when a government suddenly shows up to want to confiscate your guns, you're probably going to be a little bit wary of what their intentions are, especially given the fact that normally before any genocide, they typically go out of their way to confiscate the firearms. Now, does that mean that Michelle Lujan Grisham is the most evil woman in the world? Well, I would typically chalk this up to her just not being very bright and being a Karen. But then again, though, given the COVID policies in the state of New Mexico, a state that is primarily desert, a state that, quite frankly, well, I'll just put it this way here. I don't think the COVID policies in that state were necessary. It's almost like she was the exact same as Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. Michelle Lujan Grisham just was not as bad, but then again, at the same time, though, she did not get as much media attention during 2020. Fact of the matter is that I would chalk things up to her being extremely dumb and her not being very bright and her actually bringing on the apocalypse to her own administration. But the fact of the matter is she could just be like any other dim out there, especially those who want to take away your right to be able to defend yourself and defend your home, defend your wife, defend your kids, all that type of stuff there. Fact of the matter is, this woman right here is 100% purely a loon. That right there is what Michelle Lujan Grisham is.
But your point is valid.
You took an oath to the Constitution. Isn't it unconstitutional to say you cannot exercise your carrying license?
With one exception, and that is if there's an emergency, and I've declared an emergency for a temporary amount of time, I can invoke additional powers. No constitutional right, in my view, including my oath, is intended to be absolute. There are restrictions on free speech. There are restrictions on my freedoms. In this emergency, this 11-year-old and all these parents who have lost all these children, they deserve my attention to have the debate about whether or not in an emergency we can create a safer environment. Because what about...
I had to play that clip for you guys one more time because this is who this person is. There is no oath to the Constitution, these people. Look, when you take an oath to the Constitution, regardless of whether you agree with the amendment or not, it is your job to actually uphold said amendment. That is your job. And of course, a lot of people have already seen that this right here is not going to be the case depending on what kind of government there is. Now, by the way, this could also occur under Republican administration too. It's why it is you need to vote you need to pay very, very close attention to state and local legislation, state and local law, and vote in the people that you actually trust. Actually vet them. Make sure that they're not going to do stupid crap like what this governor did. Fact of the matter is, the state of New Mexico did exactly what the state of Virginia did, and also my home state where I live at, North Carolina, we did the exact same thing. When Ralph Northam pulled his BS in the state of Virginia, the first thing that happened was a lot of NC county sheriffs, and most of them, of course, came out and said, look, we're not going to be enforcing red flag laws. We're not going to be enforcing any form of gun confiscation. By the way, most of the sheriffs in my state are Democrats. They're good old-fashioned Southern boy, country boy type Democrats who a lot of times aren't really liberal. A lot of times are actually conservative, and they run Democrat because the party vessel. A lot of times people vote local law enforcement based upon the politics in the area. By the way, I do want to go ahead and say this really quick. Styx Hexenhammer brought this up a long time ago about the whole defund the police thing. Now, me personally, I was never in favor of it. But then again, though, given the fact that a lot of small town not sheriff's departments, but a lot of small town police departments were enforcing BS COVID edict, I would be very, very open to the idea of getting rid of small town police departments, replacing it with sheriff's departments like the county is supposed to do, like most counties already do. So that way you can hold them politically accountable every 2 to 4 years, meaning that if the cops or if the local sheriff's department are in fact a bunch of idiots or a bunch of morons who actually abuse the county laws, actually abuse the procedures, you can vote them out every 2 to 4 years. Remember, anytime a sheriff is voted on, if a sheriff is leaving office, a lot of times they will choose to let go of certain deputies. Typically what they do is before they take over, you get a letter saying show up to formation. If you don't get a letter, that means that you've been let go. Obviously, if we were operating on the case of these sheriffs here that quite frankly would much rather do their job, which is to focus in on criminals rather than focusing in on innocent gun owners who have not done anything wrong, then obviously you're going to get something like, say, sanctuary county, sanctuary areas. There was this one idiot that was running for sheriff, I want to say in Buncombe County in my home state of North Carolina, who did come out and basically say he had absolutely no problem shooting somebody who was just simply walking down the road with his pistol. That guy right there did not get elected in one of the most liberal counties in the state of North Carolina. The gun issue does not work for them, and I'm pretty sure that it's very, very possible that this is maybe one of the reasons why it is that some people believe that Michelle Lujan Grisham is being sacrificed because, quite frankly, she's being told to do this so that way they can see exactly how far they can get away with. But as you guys can see, a lot of times law enforcement's not going to enforce this because law enforcement actually knows that these types of laws and these types of executive orders are absolutely, totally stupid, and the only thing they do is take away from those who are trying to catch actual criminals rather than going after those who, quite frankly, are upholding the law. Also, as I said before, they also know that this is a constitutional right. You're right. The Second Amendment to the Constitution, the right to bear arms, is not just something because it says militia in the very, very front. It also says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, meaning that you can personally own a firearm and you can personally have one and carry one. With that right there being said, guys, I'm going to go ahead and halt this video now. I've got one more video coming out tomorrow. It's going to be a bit of a series. I know I did a few videos on the whole red pill thing and the whole men's dating thing and what's going on with men nowadays. It's time for me to actually look at the ladies too. So we're going to be talking about stuff like hoflation and crap. And the project on the death of ESPN should be out this weekend as well. So make sure you guys stick around for all that. Please hit that like button. Please consider subscribing if you've not subscribed already. Also, one more thing too. Please share the video. And please leave a comment in the comment section. I would love to hear what you guys have got to say. And I'll see you guys later.